The wolves stayed there and looked at the boy with interest. Even without their involvement, his situation could have killed him, but the wolves made it even worse. After watching him struggle in the frozen water for a few minutes, they walked down the hill. The wolves quickly surrounded the scared boy, and they howled. What did they want to do? Were they waiting for a chance to attack? The boy was caught entirely off guard by what they did next. In Belarus, the Niemen River is known to freeze over during the cold winter months. It was one of Victor Allendale's favorite times of the year to live in the area. When winter came, he could go sledding and play on the ice with his wooden sled. Rolling down the frozen hills was his favorite thing to do, but the little boy didn't know how quickly things could change for the worse. Even though Victor was only 10 years old, he was no pushover. He thought he would be the hardest person to enchant out of all his friends. While the other kids were happy to stay home and watch TV, he didn't like it too much. He liked to get out into the world and see what it had to offer. As a boy who liked to try new things, he liked to climb trees and play in the park, but sledding was his favorite thing to do. That's where he thought winter was heaven. Christmas was almost here, and he was waiting for it to make his favorite time of the year even better. He had everything he could have asked for and more. Cold snows, parties, hot cocoa, and gifts under the tree. Little Victor couldn't have been happier when he opened his present. His parents had bought him a sled made of wood that he could use immediately. All he wanted to do was play outside. There were so many options that he completely forgot about the risks. Though he was well aware of the risks, his parents warned him not to go too far away from home as there was a danger of a wolf attack. Victor didn't care about the warning, but a few days later, he wished he had paid more attention when his parents were talking. Victor was so excited that he could hardly hold it in that fateful day. He got out his sled and went outside to play. He was excited to roll down the snowy hills surrounding the river. In the winter, the Niemen River made beautiful snowy hills. They were particularly good where the river usually ran along the bank in the summer, but the 10-year-old didn't know how easily the ice on the river could break. Victor looked around to see if there was a pleasant hill he could slide down. When he found one, he went to the top, sat in his sled, and pushed himself down the small hill. He fell down once, twice, and 3 times. The little boy was overjoyed each time he felt the wind rushing through his hair, but on his 6th try, something went wrong. That time, he didn't land on his feet. Instead, he skidded across the frozen river. When he stopped, he heard the ice breaking under him. Victor ended up in a terrible situation. He didn't think the ice on that part of the river would be as thin as it was, and it started to break. He was only 10, so he didn't have the tools or experience to handle the situation he had put himself in. Things were about to get a lot worse, though. The young boy was about to be thrown from the frying pan and into the fire. One last loud crack echoed through the woods. Victor fell through the ice and into the freezing water below. He was underwater for a moment, but he pulled his head out. Things were terrible. Even though he was young, he already knew that. He wished he had paid more attention to his parents, but what he wanted most was one of them to protect him. As he struggled to stay above water, he saw something was watching him. He thought about what his parents had said a week ago. He realized that things were about to get a lot worse for him. Victor could see the wolf pack very well. They were watching him. They were trying to take advantage of the situation he had gotten himself into. Victor wanted the wolves to go away, and he wanted to wake up in his warm home. He wished to escape the icy river where the wolves were all around. His frozen face was covered in hot tears. He didn't know how to get himself out of the situation, but he didn't know that the wolves had been making their plans. The wolves watched him in curiosity. His situation was already potentially deadly, but the wolves posed their complicating threat. After watching him struggle in the river for a minute, they finally decided to descend the hill. They surrounded the terrified boy and howled at him. Were they just waiting for the perfect opportunity to attack? What they did next surprised the boy. One of the wolves moved forward first. It looked like she was the leader. She rushed to Victor and was able to grab him by the collar. The boy was scared, so it made sense that he screamed. Victor was pulled against the ice with his eyes closed. He tried to figure out what the wolf was doing, and then everything started to make sense. He realized that the wolves only wanted to help him. They weren't biting him, but they were trying to pull him out of the hole in the ice by pulling at his clothes. He knew this, so he tried hard to hold onto the ice ledge, but it was too slippery. Then, a second wolf came over to help. They worked hard together to pull him out. But Victor had no idea how the situation would end. With the help of the wolves, Victor could pull himself onto the ice after a lot of pulling. They were worried as they looked down at him. He wasn't sure that they wanted to help more than anything else. He laid on his back to catch his breath while still shocked. The wolf stood by him to ensure he didn't get into trouble. Victor knew they could still be dangerous, and he didn't want to discover how unkind they could be. Instead, he smiled at the wolves who had saved him and slowly returned home. The wolves stood by the river and watched him go. He turned around to look at them before he got to the top of the hill, and he could no longer see them. At least he had a story that would never happen again. Victor will remember this meeting for the rest of his life. But what would happen if the roles were switched? What if it was a wolf who was in danger instead of the person? Would the same thing still happen?